Welcome to this Strategic Explainer. Today, we're tearing down the April 2026 India-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement. We're going to focus strictly on the hard macroeconomic data and the geopolitical shifts you absolutely need for conceptual clarity and, of course, rapid exam recall. Let's get right into it. Here's the game plan for today. We're looking at core targets, tariff liberalization, services and investment, geopolitical significance, an exam framework, and finally, a rapid recall session. Section 1, Core Targets. Let's kick things off with the most highly testable data points that really drive the underlying policy here. So, signed in April 2026, this agreement is a massive economic milestone. It's essentially the foundational pillar for regional economic stability right now. Think of it as the trigger event that radically alters the trade velocity between New Delhi and Wellington. We're shifting from standard, everyday diplomatic engagement into a deeply integrated economic partnership. All right. Here's our first major anchor. India secures literally 100% duty-free access for its exports across all tariff lines. That's a game changer. It instantly ramps up export potential for labor-intensive sectors. Think textiles, leather, engineering, pharmaceuticals. It's directly plugging Indian MSMEs right into the global value chains. On the flip side, New Zealand is eliminating or reducing tariffs on about 95% of its exports to India. For Wellington, this means sweeping access to a booming consumer base for stuff like high-value fruits, wine, wood, and metals. But pause, and notice that asymmetry for a second. 100% for India, 95% for New Zealand. That 5% difference? Well, that's exactly where India's strategic domestic interests come into play. Section 2, Tariff Liberalization. So how exactly does a nation open its economy while still shielding its most vulnerable domestic sectors? Let's take a look. You can clearly see the strict protection of sensitive agricultural sectors here. Things like domestic dairy, sugar, and edible oils completely excluded from full liberalization. That was an absolute, non-negotiable red line to protect domestic Indian farmers. But then on the liberalized side, it's a highly calibrated opening. We've got phased reductions for high-value dairy and wine, and duty-free entry for critical industrial raw materials, like woodlogs and coking coal, which feed directly into Atmanirbhar Bharat manufacturing goals. It's very strategic. Section 3, Services and Investment. Moving beyond just physical goods, let's map out the exact timeline set up for mobility and capital flow. Okay, you need to lock these 4 metrics into your memory. First up, a $20 billion investment commitment from New Zealand spread over 15 years. Second, a target to double bilateral trade to $5 billion in just 5 years. Third, 5,000 work visas issued annually for Indian professionals. And fourth, New Zealand will update its domestic laws within exactly 18 months to protect Indian geographical indications. These are crucial numbers. And look, these mobility and service provisions aren't just minor administrative tweaks. They directly integrate Indian professionals and businesses into global networks. We're talking about mutual recognition of standards, which totally slashes bureaucratic red tape. There's an easing of trade in IT, education, and finance. Plus, throwing in post-study work options for Indian students essentially creates this continuous, seamless talent pipeline between the two nations. Section 4, Geopolitical Significance. Because economics never exist in a vacuum, right? Let's break down how this alters the regional balance of power. Strategically speaking, this agreement leverages India's manufacturing muscle to drastically deepen its footprint across the Indo-Pacific. By locking in a super reliable partner like New Zealand, India is actively reducing its overdependence on traditional Western markets. It's a highly calculated move. The goal here is promoting resilient supply chains and keeping markets open, especially in an era where, let's face it, global trade is increasingly being weaponized. Now, this concept of Indo-Pacific economic integration is really the geopolitical anchor of the entire agreement. New Zealand is actively using this FTA to mitigate its strategic over-reliance on Chinese markets. By tapping into India's massive demographic dividend and expanding investment into Asia through New Delhi, New Zealand is hedging its strategic bets. Honestly, it is a textbook example of integrating into the Indo-Pacific specifically to diversify supply chains. Section 5, Exam Framework. Let's synthesize all of this into a structured 4-step framework that is practically tailor-made for your mains answer writing. If you can replicate this exact structure under pressure, you're going to hit every single necessary geographical, economic, and strategic keyword. Step 1, you start with the April 2026 milestone. Step 2, hit the examiner with the hard economic core, the 100% duty-free access and that $20 billion investment. Step 3, you elevate the answer with a strategic pillar, bringing in the Indo-Pacific and New Zealand's diversification from China. And step 4, you close it out strongly with the macro theme of resilient supply chains and regional stability. Simple, clean, effective. Section 6, Rapid Recall. Time to test yourselves. Let's run a rapid-fire test on the critical data points we just anchored. Question 1. What is the specific timeline and financial targets set for New Zealand's investment in India? Try to answer this in your head right now before I reveal the metric. Think about both the capital flow and the duration. Got it? It's approximately $20 billion over 15 years. That is a massive 15-year commitment, and it strongly signals a deep, long-term economic partnership, not just some quick transactional deal. Next question. Which 3 sensitive Indian agricultural sectors are strictly excluded from full liberalization? Think back to that comparative framework we did outlining our strategic protectionism. What were those non-negotiable red lines for India? Yep, it's dairy, sugar, and edible oils. Protecting these specific domestic sectors while simultaneously opening up raw materials like coke and coal perfectly demonstrates India's highly calibrated approach to modern FTAs. All right, final question. What is the primary geopolitical motivation driving New Zealand's export expansion to India? This is where economics translates directly into strategic autonomy. Why is Wellington pivoting toward New Delhi right now? Exactly, to diversify trade away from an overdependence on China. By shifting its economic weight towards India, New Zealand gets to integrate much deeper into a multipolar Asian economy, which ultimately secures its own strategic autonomy. Now, I want you to anchor this quote in your memory. The FTA reflects the broader strategic convergence between India and New Zealand in promoting resilient supply chains, open markets, and Indo-Pacific economic connectivity. This exact phrase bridges the gap between a dry bilateral trade document and the actual reality of regional stability. It is literally the ideal conclusion to your analysis. As we wrap up, I'm going to leave you with this analytical question to chew on. As global supply chains continue to fragment, how will India leverage this specific FTA template, 100% access combined with rigid agricultural protectionism, to secure strategic autonomy in future Indo-Pacific negotiations? Think about how this localized agreement ripples across the broader geopolitical landscape. Keep reviewing these frameworks and stay focused. Catch you in the next explainer.